Breaking from Iowa, attorneys representing Governor Reynolds say they filed an appeal to the state Supreme Court. They're challenging a decision earlier this week that is keeping the state's 6-week abortion ban from going into effect.
Governor Reynolds signed the bill into law in 2018, banning most abortions as early as 6 weeks in a pregnancy. A challenge to that law led to an injunction in 2019. It continues to keep the law from taking effect.
The judge in this week's ruling said she didn't have enough authority to overturn the injunction. The attorneys are asking the state Supreme Court to allow Reynolds to enforce the law. So for now, abortion remains legal in Iowa up to 20 weeks of a pregnancy.